that was one of the coolest hymns we've sung. It's a little bit like when you see those old ads from like Good Housekeeping or something 50 years ago that say you should freshen up your makeup before your husband comes home. Yes, it is. I just, we would all be good to do that. And sing, make your kids sing that song every morning. It's a great hymn. Thank you very much. And certainly appropriate for today's lesson. Years ago, I was in a ward when I was single, and I was at kind of a troubled time in my life, and the bishop pounced on me day one, and I said, you know what, you just need to leave me alone for like a long time. And he did. He left me alone for like 9 months, and then he said, maybe you could take on the 4-year-olds in primary. And I did, and that was the coolest thing, because I thought it was so neat to get back to the basics of the gospel. And that's really what we're doing with these lessons in Relief Society, with the gospel essentials, is get back to the basics. And so anyway, I'm happy to be able to do that. Not that I'm comparing you to 4-year-olds, but it's good to do that and get back and review ourselves. So here we are. Today we're going to talk about the word wisdom. And we know that the Lord says that our bodies are temples. Okay? So there's a picture of the temple. And that we need to treat them with that same level of respect that we would treat the temple. And I don't know anybody that goes to the temple that doesn't have the greatest awe and respect for that. But we struggle doing the same for ourselves, for our own bodies and minds and hearts and so forth. And so we need to sort of revisit that whole notion of taking good care of ourselves and respecting this gift that the Lord has given us. Really the primary reason for our being here on the earth is to have this body. So, if we're going to talk about the word wisdom, can someone please sort of remind us how the word of wisdom came to be? Anybody remember the story of how that came to be? Yes.
I think it was Sister Smith that was a little tired of cleaning up all the tobacco after they were spitting it all the time.
Yeah, they were spitting it all the time. What's up with that? And that's exactly right. It wasn't at the school of the prophets even where this was going on. It was, now to think back about that, it obviously seems amusing, but I think I read a lot in my preparation for this lesson about sort of the history of the word of wisdom. And I have a quote here actually from Brigham Young from the Journal of Discourses that says that when this school of the prophets assembled together in this room after breakfast, the first they did was to light their pipes, and while smoking, talk about the great things of the kingdom.
Seems odd now.
And spit all over the room is what the quote says. And as soon as the pipe was out of their mouths, a large chew of tobacco would then be taken. And often when the prophet Joseph Smith entered the room to give the school instructions, he would find himself in a cloud of tobacco smoke. This and the complaints of his wife at having to clean so filthy a floor made the prophet think upon the matter. And he inquired of the Lord relating to the conduct of the elders in using tobacco. So I think that he specifically went inquiring about the use of tobacco versus other things. And the revelation known as the word of wisdom was a result of this inquiry. So, not unlike issues that we face today, we have a problem and we seek help from the Lord. And it's interesting that the prophet said, this is enough of a concern that I need to take this to the Lord and find out really where we ought to be on this whole use of tobacco. The more I read about how we kind of got where we are, this revelation comes of the word of wisdom, which obviously we'll review in a minute. And the people, apparently it was so much a part of their culture and just the way they lived their lives, and in their minds, survival related to drink whiskey and to smoke and do various things, that really when the word of wisdom first came out, this was not, number one, it wasn't embraced, and number two, it really wasn't considered a commandment, which we'll see in the introduction of the word of wisdom. It's not really considered a commandment. And that it took quite a while. It had actually no bearing on your joining the church, for instance. You could be baptized if you had these issues or habits. Going to the temple and so forth. It wasn't until 1921 that the prophet, I think it was Heber J. Grant, said that we need to make this a contingency upon your temple attendance, that you actually obey the word of wisdom. So it took them years and years to embrace this. And there's even a quote I read where I think it was Brigham Young that said, you know what, we just need to go to the youth with this because the old people aren't giving it up. They're just not, it's too much a part of who they are. And they really believed that surviving, I presume, in harsh climates and so forth, was contingent upon their imbibing some of these things that nowadays we, of course, do not imbibe it. So there's sort of an interesting history behind it, and as time has gone on, obviously we've sort of closed up the gap a little bit, and I hope have a little bit of better understanding, perhaps, of the word of wisdom and its value and so forth, which we'll discuss. So, if you have your scriptures, you're welcome to open up to section 89. If not, I'm going to read this for you. Because the first 4 verses of section 89 really are an introduction to the word of wisdom. And there are some interesting aspects here to this. So, when I read the scriptures, I tend to read them quickly because I just want to get it out there and then spend a little more time discussing it rather than reading. So here we go. In verse 1, a word of wisdom for the benefit of the council of high priests assembled in Kirtland and the church and also the saints in Zion. To be sent greeting, not by commandment or constraint, but by revelation and the word of wisdom, showing forth the order and the will of God in the temporal salvation of all saints in the last days. Let's just stop at verse 2 for a second, where it tells us that this is to be sent by greeting, not by commandment or constraint, but by revelation. So again, this was not a commandment when it first came out. This was what? A recommendation. Yeah, we think you ought to ease up on that stuff, right? I actually read stories too about people giving sermons in church, and then when church was over, going out and lighting up a cigar or whatever. And again, it's sort of amusing to us today because we've come a long way in this whole thing, but back then, I don't think it was. I just don't think it was amusing, and I don't think it was, it just didn't carry the weight that it appears to carry today. So, I read an interesting article at, I think it was a talk given by Brother Hugh Nibley on the Word of Wisdom, however many years ago, and I thought this was an interesting quote. The word of wisdom doesn't belong to the order of the eternal gospel. It is temporal and temporary, but no less the will of God. We do not covenant and promise to keep the word of wisdom because our promises and covenants are eternal. But we are bound while we're here, so it is not secondary in importance. Now, please don't misunderstand, and I don't think Hugh Nibley was one of the prophets. So, I think what's interesting about that is that this is a temporal law. We live in a moral world where these are issues today, and always have been. But when we are in the next life, I don't think that you're going to have the option. I just don't think you can, buy a pack of cigarettes or get yourself a pint of vodka. I don't think we can do that, or partake in some other things. And so it truly is a temporal law. It's for our benefit here in this life. And yet I hadn't really thought of it in those terms. But I think when we get to the other side, if we continue to go through like temple recommend interviews or something, that perhaps this whole do you keep the word of wisdom might not be on the list of questions anymore. And that's what we need to understand, is that this did not start out as a commandment. And it's amusing to us now because so many years have passed, but the truth of the matter is, if President Monson came out now with, all right, I really want you to give up green Jell-O because it's not really good for you, whatever. Some of us would struggle with that because it's a lifelong tradition. Is it not? We would struggle with it because it seems so simple. What difference does that really make? You gonna keep me out of heaven because I had one of those Jello blind telephones?